Well, good evening, everybody. It's good to be with you this tonight, and as we continue our study of Luke. But wanted to get started with any prayer requests we might have this week. Amy. All right, let's pray. God, we thank you for this evening. We thank you for this time together as we look at one of the most difficult periods of Jesus' life tonight, and just see how resolute he was to do your will and to bring us redemption, God. And just pray that would take root in our hearts to see what he endured on our behalf. God, we want to specifically pray for this friend of Amy's who's just dealing with some marital issues, and pray for reconciliation there. Pray for patience and understanding, and ultimately that you'd give them the help and resources they need to work and save their marriage. God, I just pray that you would help them to have the resources and take the steps needed to do that. Just pray for that union, God, that you would protect it. God, we just also want to just ask that you just be with our church and be with us tonight as we look at your word and discuss. God, we love you and we thank you and pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. All right. I wanted to start with tonight because we're going to be talking about a grief that Jesus experienced in the Garden of Gethsemane. And so I wanted to ask, what is your favorite comfort when you're feeling sad? It can be a food, it can be music, it can be some kind of activity, some ritual that you have. But if you have anything that brings you comfort when you're in a moment of a low point. Music? Okay.
Krispy Kreme donuts.
Okay. Just Krispy Kreme?
Yes.
Okay. See.
Praying. I do that if I get down a little bit. I just pray. It does make me feel. I just like to be outside in nature. I just always feel closer to God when I'm in His creation.
Even in June and July? Even in June and July when it's hot outside?
Well, in the shade. Or in the
Yeah.
I feel like it's sad.
I couldn't think of anything specific, but I like to be creative in these moments. Create something, do something, work on something. And I feel like that brings me a lot of... it just puts my mind on something else, helps me work through in a different way. So I couldn't think of anything specific, but, anytime I can create, I think that helps. But well, the reason, like I said, we asked this is because, we're looking at Jesus tonight in a moment of grief and anguish. And when we're grieving and in these moments, we could often turn to food or, like I said, music or community or a time in nature, to help us kind of lift our spirits. And we know that experiencing grief is this universal human experience. And as Jesus coming into our world as human, even he experienced these moments. And so in this session, we really encounter almost one of the most sacred places in Scripture. Almost feels like we're intruding a little bit as Jesus prays in the Garden of Gethsemane. And Jesus agonizes over the task set before him of going to the cross, but ultimately, submitting to what God has in store for him to bring, redemption for us, and as we continue to head toward the cross. You might have remembered from last session, if you were with us for the part 1 of Luke, that since chapter 9, Jesus has been resolutely set out for the cross, and his eyes have been set on that this entire time, but it doesn't necessarily make it fully easy, when he gets to that moment. We see that tonight as he wrestles, but still stays true to what God has for him. And so as always, I would just want to give you a few clues of maybe what to look for as we go through our session tonight. So first of all, just look at just how Jesus' emotional state is described in the Garden of Gethsemane. What is he experiencing and why is he experiencing it? And then what is Jesus asking when he asks for God to take this cup from me? What is that cup and what does that mean? And then how should we respond to Jesus' experience in the garden? Because there's something here for us that even though this is kind of personal, private moment that Jesus is praying to his Father, there's still action for us to take in regard to what he does for us. And so look out for those things and just take this moment almost as a moment of worship as we kind of, like I said, almost feel like intruding in this moment as Jesus grieves, but ultimately submits himself to the Father. So we'll watch our video and then we'll discuss.
We enter now into the final hours before Jesus' death, and Luke is going to present us a number of scenes that depict how the human race, both then and now, respond to Jesus and how Jesus responds to them. Very few things are going to give us insight into our own hearts like what we see happen in the hours leading up to Jesus' death. On the night before Jesus died, he wanted to celebrate the Passover meal with his disciples. So he gives instructions for all 12 of them to gather in an upper room with him. And that would have included Judas, who has already been thinking about betraying Jesus because he was so disappointed in Jesus for not making moves to overthrow Rome the way that Judas wanted him to. Chapter 22, verse 3, then Satan entered Judas, called Iscariot, who was numbered among the 12. Judas went away and discussed with the chief priests and the temple police how he could hand him over to them. They were glad and agreed to give him silver. So he accepted the offer and started looking for a good opportunity to betray him to them when the crowd was not present. The Jews didn't want to arrest Jesus in public, you see, because he was still so doggone popular. It would have caused a commotion. And Jesus was really secretive about his private hideouts, primarily for his own safety. So the Jewish authorities needed somebody on the inside to reveal Jesus' private location. Well, meanwhile, Jesus and his disciples have found a private place to celebrate the Passover, and Judas joins back up with them. They're in the middle of this Passover meal when we finished our last session by looking at Jesus' final Passover meal with his disciples, where Jesus said as plainly as possible, I am about to pour out my blood like the Passover lamb to set you free from slavery. The Passover meal and the sacrifice of the lamb that it involved, those were the symbols. These next few chapters are the reality. Today's passage, Luke 22, takes us into one of the most mysterious and most sacred places in the Bible, the Garden of Gethsemane. Y'all, this is one of those passages I feel like I ought to go through on my knees. It's a holy place where I feel like anything that I can say falls so far short of what is actually happening. We ought to observe this scene and just tremble and worship. Luke 22, verse 39. And he came out and went, as was his custom, to the Mount of Olives, and the disciples followed him. And when Jesus came to the place, he said to them, pray that you may not enter into temptation. And he withdrew from them about a stone's throw, and he knelt down and he prayed. Verse 42, saying, Father, if you are willing, remove this cup from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but yours be done." And there appeared to him an angel from heaven, strengthening him, and being in agony, he prayed even more earnestly, and his sweat became like great drops of blood falling down to the ground. And when he rose from prayer, he came to the disciples and found them sleeping for sorrow. And he said to them, "Why are you sleeping? Rise and pray that you may not enter into temptation." And then they lifted up their eyes, and there was Judas and the temple guards coming to take away Jesus to be crucified. One of the first things that we have to notice is that Jesus does not go to his death with the defiance and the bravery that we might expect. Jesus appears in these verses weak, almost scared. By contrast, a lot of the world's great heroes have died with their fist in the face of the evil empire. Think scenes portrayed in a movie like Gladiator, dying defiantly, saying, "You don't scare me. I'll never back down, and I will have my vengeance in this life or the next." Other Jewish heroes like Spartacus or Maccabees, they died in this defiant way. Plato says that Socrates, when he was executed, was cool and stoic. When he was given the hemlock to drink, he was calm. His color didn't change, and he even cracked a few jokes before his death. He was the picture of stoic defiance. Many of Jesus' own followers would die defiantly. Polycarp, for example, who was the student of the Apostle John, when they came to take Polycarp to be executed, burned at the stake, observers say that he went calmly. When asked what he would like to say before being burned alive, he said, "You think I'm afraid of this fire? It's going to burn for just a minute and then it'll be gone. You should be afraid of the fires of hell. I'm not scared of these temporary flames. Come on, boys, bring on the fire." But that's not how Jesus went to his death. Like I said in this chapter, he almost seems weak. Luke points out in verse 43 that an angel showed up to strengthen him. This is the first time in Luke's gospel that something like that had happened. Everywhere else, Jesus shows unflinching courage in the face of danger. In fact, right before this, Jesus' disciples are telling him he's crazy for going to Jerusalem because he's sure to be in danger there. But Luke says he set his face like a flint to go to Jerusalem. Jesus had always been the bold, brave one, but now here in this garden, he's overwhelmed in agony, asking the Father to take the cup away from him. And it's not like, by the way, he's withering in the face of pain because the soldiers haven't even taken him captive yet. Mark's gospel says that when Jesus knelt down to pray, he began to be astonished and became deeply troubled. In Greek, it says he suddenly began to be astonished. In other words, all at once, Jesus saw something that hadn't been there before. And when he saw that thing, he was deeply troubled. What Jesus saw was so overwhelming and shocking that he almost died from it. In Mark 14:34, Jesus said, "My soul is very sorrowful, even to death." In Luke's account, Luke, our medical doctor, tells us that Jesus was under such strain that he began to sweat great drops of blood, a condition that doctors call hematidrosis, where you're under such distress that your capillaries burst. Here is Jesus, the only begotten Son of God, who spoke the worlds into existence, who walked on top of angry waves, calmed the fiercest storm, cast out demons with a word, healed diseases, brought life back from the dead. Here's Jesus so horrified at something that he sees that his capillaries burst, nearly causing his death. What can make the mighty Son of God so terrified? It was the judgment for our sin that he was about to endure. I want you to notice verse 42, what he prays. He says, "Father, if you're willing, remove this cup from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but yours be done." He calls God their Father, Abba, a term of the closest intimacy with God. You see, up until this point, Jesus had enjoyed an intimacy with the Father. It was his life. He often withdrew to be alone with God so that he could draw strength, and the Father had always radiated with openness to him, sometimes even, as we've seen, affirming him publicly. But now, in the hour that he needs him most, only silence. And so Jesus stumbles back to his disciples, looking almost for some kind of comfort, and they're asleep. So he wakes them up and he says, "Guys, I need you to stay up with me." You see what I mean about weak and tender? There's something here. It's like he needs somebody. But his disciples are asleep and his Father seems silent. Utter aloneness. Have you ever felt really alone? Like a friend, a trusted friend turned on you. Somebody you cared about betrayed you. Your parents failed you. Jesus felt that kind of aloneness, and not just aloneness, the pain of rejection. Have you ever really been rejected by somebody that you love? This is what Jesus went through. I think about what it would be like for me to do this to one of my children, to have them look to me in a moment of pain or weakness, and for me to turn away from them in scorn and say essentially, you're not my child, in the moment they most needed me. My children have only known me for a few years, and I'm not a perfect father by any means. So what was it like to lose the infinite love of the Father that you have enjoyed and known from all eternity? In Gethsemane, Jesus looked full into the cup of God's wrath, and it overwhelmed him so badly that it almost killed him. And so he prayed, if there's any other way, let this cup pass from me. But see, there was no other way. Isaiah 51:17 describes God's wrath against our sin like a toxic poison that's kept in a cup. As that cup was being offered to us, Jesus stepped into the way and he took it in our place and he drank it for us down to the dregs. Had you or I been there and we tried to stop Jesus and say, no, don't do this, he would have looked at us and said, no, JD, this cup is your cup. There is no other way for you to be delivered from this cup than for me to take it in your place. I heard a pastor say that this scene here in Gethsemane ought to make us do two things, and I'll add a third to his list. This scene should make us, number one, stand amazed at Jesus' love for us in his darkest hour. Remember that interesting little detail Luke pointed out, that an angel came to minister to him at this point. You ever wonder what the angel said to minister to him? We don't know. But again, the writer of Hebrews 12:2 says that when Jesus got up from here to go to the cross, he did so with joy because of something that had been set before him. What was it that had been set before him? What did Jesus see on the other side of the cross that he didn't have yet on this side? Was it his Father's approval? No, that was his before he left heaven. Was it rule over the universe? No, that was his before the foundation of the world. He could have wiped everything out with a wave of his hand and started over. The one thing that he wouldn't have, that he would only have on that side of the cross, is you. You were the joy set before him, which enabled him to endure the cross. Isaiah says that we were precious to him, which is hard to even get our minds around, because when something's precious to you, you'd give up anything for it. If one of my kids were deathly sick and there was only one medicine in the entire world that could save them, I wouldn't care how much it cost. I would pay anything because my children are precious to me. Listen, you were precious to God. A God who had everything and needed nothing set his love upon you, and he said, I can't be happy again until I have restored you. That's what God says to the prophet Hosea. Stand amazed at the love that Jesus showed for you in his darkest hour. And that leads me to number two. This scene should make us rest assured of Jesus' love for us in our darkest hours. You see, maybe you've gone through some dark chapters and it even felt like God had abandoned you or he wasn't listening to you. Well, see, you're wrong. You have to be. You see, Gethsemane proves you're wrong, because Jesus in that hour there in Gethsemane did not turn his back on you in his darkest hour when hell was literally squeezing the life out of him. If he didn't turn his back on you then, do you really think he would turn his back on you now? So when you say, why God, where are you? Why don't you answer my prayers? Or why don't you change these things I need you to change? You may not always be able to figure out the exact answers to what God is doing, but Jesus' time in the Garden of Gethsemane helps you see that the one thing your suffering cannot mean is that Jesus has forgotten about you or that he's abandoned you. If Jesus did not abandon you at this moment in Gethsemane, when hell was literally crushing him, he won't ever abandon you. Not in your darkest hour, not in your weakest moment, not for any reason ever. Finally, number three, this scene should make us be driven by his love for the world in its darkest hour. Do you realize what Gethsemane tells us about Jesus' willingness to save sinners? Gethsemane shows us what it means for God to so love the world that he would give his only son. Gethsemane shows us how far the Father would run to bring home that wandering son and the price he would pay to buy us back from sin. If this is how the Father feels about the lost world, shouldn't you and I dream great things for God and then expect great things of him in helping us reach the world? Is there anything too great for us to ask him? Is there any request that would exhaust the limits of his love? Remember those words from the hymn writer John Newton, thou art coming to a king, so with thee large petitions bring. For his grace and power are such that none can ever ask too much. So here's my question. is what you're asking God to do and what you're attempting for him. Is it worthy of the magnitude of his sacrifice? You see, Jesus didn't die so that you and I could huddle together in churches and bemoan the dying state of our culture. He died so that we could bring the nations to worship. He died so your friends could be reconciled to the Father. Are you asking him to work in their lives in a way that is consistent with his sacrifice? Are you asking him to do great things in the lives of those around you according to the measure of his love expressed in Gethsemane? Friend, here is the reality. Jesus hadn't changed. The same Jesus we see praying in Gethsemane is the Jesus who hears our prayers today. We can literally never presume too much on God's grace.
All right. So the first thing that we need to recognize is just what Jesus experiences in this moment. Jesus has known his purpose for coming the whole time. It did not catch him by surprise, but he's really now coming face to face with that purpose. And JD pointed out, Jesus doesn't necessarily approach death defiantly, but it really appears in anguish. And how does this, what I want to ask in light of that is, how does this image of Jesus impact your understanding of who he is? Human. Yes, that was the first thing that I thought of. I think we know that about Jesus. We know, doctrinally he's fully God and fully man, and sometimes there's like, what sense do we make of that? But we know those two foundational truths. But I think a lot of times when we look at what Jesus does in the Gospels, calming the storms and doing these miracles, like it's often easier to see the divine, the God, more than the human part of him. And yet in this moment we see, his humanity fully on display. And I think that should help us to interact with what Jesus is doing in this moment, what he's going to endure on the cross. This wasn't something that he had no skin in the game. It wasn't something that didn't hurt him, didn't cause him pain and anguish, but it really, every moment of this that he felt, not just the physical pain, but the taking on the penalty of sin upon himself. What else do you see in this moment? How does it affect your image of Jesus?
He was fully God because he knew what was coming.
Mm-hmm.
Where so many things that we worry about are things that we don't even know whether they're going to happen or not.
Mm-hmm.
But he knew in that where he was there, he knew what was coming. He knew what was going to happen.
Yeah, this is not something that caught him by surprise, and yet he stayed the course. Any other observations or thoughts? Yeah.
It's almost like he had to work at being human. Because at any time he could have said, I'm done.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going back. But
Yeah.
he stayed as human, going through all that.
Or at least could have used any divine power to escape the situation, or
Yeah, he stayed.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a job, to sit there and try to do something or not.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's why a lot of people don't really think it is as, I guess they feel like he doesn't really feel it like a human would because he's God.
Mm-hmm.
But it shows right there, like the emotional state where he's bleeding, dripping, drops of blood.
Mm-hmm.
Would that be like you're in so much fear that your heart is pounding and your blood is like going through your veins for them to burst and keep you bleeding? I mean, I really think that a lot of people think because he's God, he doesn't feel like that. It's just something we see, but he didn't actually feel like he did.
And I'm with that too. We recognize the pain that he feels in the cross. We recognize the anguish and the despair and there's a triumph in it, but it still comes at a great cost to him. But I haven't really equated this moment with that one. In the same way that this was anguishing in a different way. This is the mental game, if you will. That there's we see kind of all these experiences, all these emotions that Jesus experiences in this moment, and yet stays fully submitted to his Father's will.
Gethsemane,
Yeah, go ahead.
Gethsemane, the Mount of Olives and Gethsemane means an olive press.
Mhm.
And he was being pressed down.
Mhm.
He was being, he was the anointed one, and he was bearing all of the weight. And I think that I don't look at what he was going through in this as fear,
Mhm.
as more as anguish and suffering over his disciples. He was thinking of them, and that's why he wanted them to stay awake, because he knew that they were going to deny him and feel the remorse of what was going to happen. He knew that all of these things were going to play out in front of the 12 people that he had closest to him, and yet they were going to be so far away from him. And I think of that's why he was being pressed down. He was being, by all of the weight of the sin that he was going to see and have to experience for every single one of us, that weight. I can't imagine, how could you imagine that? I couldn't imagine sweat and blood dripping down because I had so much anguish and suffering. So I think everything that he was feeling in the Gethsemane was all about us. Like, it was just pure. I don't think there was one thing that he was thinking about himself. I just truly feel like his whole entire being was about every single person that would ever be born, to live, to die. And that's just how I look at it.
Yeah. And what I think about this moment, that being said, is like, he says he doesn't approach death defiantly, but from this moment on, there's no hint of a wavering. This is the moment if he's going to do something, and that he rises from this moment saying, "No, God, it's all what you want me to do," and that way he kind of does approach death defiantly when it gets to that moment, but not in this moment. So obviously, one of the details that Luke describes is this that no other writer does, is sweating these drops of blood. And of course, there's actually a medical condition called hematidrosis, which is when someone under this intense stress exudes blood from their skin like sweat. But really, regardless of the physical manifestation, Jesus, we see, is deeply distressed, deeply troubled. He says, even to the point of death. And yet Jesus responds to these intense emotions with prayer. So you said one of the things you do in sadness is pray. And I wanted to kind of, with that in mind, to think about, when have you felt most stressed or troubled? Maybe it's not a specific situation, but a series of, I feel most stressed whenever this happens. And in those moments, you typically respond to that pain by praying, or what would it look like to make prayer that first response to the stress in your life? Dorothy. Yes, yeah. Those moments where, we, this past year have gone through theft from a contractor and those kind of things, and the unfairness of that, the anger of that. But often, in those instances, I want to respond with action, and prayer feels like inaction, even though it's not. So I think, for me, prayer is not always my first default like it should be.
Yeah, I was thinking, just wish
I looked at you when she said that. Yeah.
2 months ago, we had 3 of our accounts. They got in all 3 just by somehow they got into our computer. We wake up, oh no, now they're in that one, now they're in that one the next day. That was very, very stressful, working that out. I don't know if I did much praying. I think I was just
I'll go.
Yeah.
So for me, I don't typically respond with prayer in a stressful or pain situation, but a couple months ago, got a phone call about my dad, and I know for sure I was screaming and crying and yelling into the sky. I just walked off on my own, but all I could do was pray because I felt I was different states away, nothing I could do, so I had to give it to the Lord. And yeah, I don't typically use that as a first response, but I want to relate it to how my version reads here. An angel came to Jesus' side and strengthened him. Then he started bleeding or sweating blood. To me, it seems like you would be sweating blood yourself, and then the angel would come and you'd be better. But it's the opposite. So I think an angel visited me and helped me to pray in that moment, or something like that.
I think that's, it's those moments where you, like, all you can do is pray. Is usually, like, that's the one we go to first, even though we should do that in every situation. But I think, we've all had those moments where it's like, I can't do anything else but pray at this point. And I think Jesus prays for different, reasons. It's not that he has no other options, but he knows that it's only by remaining connected to his Father that he'll have the strength to do what he needs to do. So a few things that are demonstrated here that I want to point out that JD mentions is specifically tied to Jesus' love. That in this moment, regarding all of his actions, is his love for us. And he even says, the first that we stand amazed at Jesus' love for us in his darkest hour. And he makes the mention of, going to Hebrews 12, where it talks about the joy set before Jesus. Before the joy set before him endured the cross, and how really Jesus in that moment didn't need anything. He never needs anything. But in this moment, the joy set before the cross was our redemption, that the restored relationship with us. And so this was a question to me that I'm not fully done wrestling with it or thinking through what it means. But do you see yourself as bringing Jesus joy? And what would change about your relationship with Jesus if you regularly consider that you bring him joy? So two things. Do you see that, and what would change if you did see it that way?
I pray that all the time, that I don't bring a stench to his nostrils, and that I bring a sweet aroma. I've prayed that multiple times because, years went by of what I thought, I was breaking the 10 Commandments. I had made God in my own image of how I think that he was, and I lived out my life that, and I was a very bad ambassador of Christ, and I brought stench to his nostrils. And when I finally gave everything to him and surrendered, I pray that all the time. I don't want to be that person. I want more of you, less of me. And I want to be a sweet aroma. I want to bring a smile to your face. So I hope he's joyful over me, because he says I'm his inheritance and he's mine.
Dave?
What Tina just said just made me think about me as a father, and because God is our Father, and my kids, I had very good kids, very, very little difficulty with it, but there were times where they were just awful. But they still brought me joy. And it's because they were my kids. And so there's got to be a connection there too. That in spite of how awful we can be, we try our best and to have this relationship with God, and we're going to bring him joy. It just will happen.
Yeah, I think, I certainly don't think you have to be a parent to understand God's love. But for me, anyway, it's helped me tremendously because, like, there's like you said, the joy that you experience with your kids, regardless of all the other things going on. Certainly there's times, like you said, that they don't necessarily make me happy, don't bring me joy in that moment, but by and large, it's my relationship with them that continues to bring that back to that experience. And I think that has helped me a lot in my faith of growing in my faith of how I understand myself as a father, flawed as I am, and my kids as flawed as they are, and yet that's the image that God uses for him and his people. His primary title is Father, and I think that's helped me a lot. Anybody else think about this idea of bringing God joy?
enjoy. Even as adults, like the way we look at them, he does, I think, look at us like that.
So the second thing connected to Jesus' love is that, so we can stand amazed at his love for us and in his darkest hour, but we can rest assured of Jesus' love for us in our darkest hour. And JD makes the mention, if Jesus didn't deny us when he was feeling the depths of this grief, when he was at his weakest, so to speak, he certainly won't abandon us in his resurrected glory when we feel our weakest. And just draws the attention that there's nothing that we can do to forfeit God's love for us in pursuit of us. But when are you most prone to feel like God is done with you? And what are ways that you can remind yourself that God has never done with you?
We make the same mistake more than once. And learn to pray that all the people are okay. He's done accepting the prayers.
So,
In his word, they simply tell you that he simply doesn't care.
yeah.
When you pray about something, the situation just doesn't change. Whether it's your income or your health or relationships you have with somebody, and maybe even somebody close like a family member, and feel like he's kind of done with you, and you wonder what goes, what gives. But yeah, that's happened.
See?
Missed opportunities on sharing the word with somebody you're, have a relationship with, or just being with.
Sure.
I don't think I've ever felt that God was done with me. Like, all right, boy, that's enough. But there have been so many times that I've, in anguish, not just asked the question, but in anguish, why is this happening? Or, you know the desire of my heart, and that's not the direction that it's going. And but when it's all said and done, I always see he knew better than me. Yeah.
That's another thing as a parent, it's like, trust me on this. I've got this, like I know you think I don't know what's going on here, but I have a plan for this, but in our limited understanding, we always see it, the hindsight's 20/20, and we can see how it works. So the third thing that we see is in this moment of Jesus' love for us is that we must be driven by Jesus' love for the world in its darkest hour. So JD makes mention that sometimes Christians have the attitude of let's huddle together and kind of in our little personal holiness bubble and criticize what's wrong with the world, and yet God's love in this moment shows us that we should be motivated to see the world as God sees it, something worth dying for. And so, last question for this evening: what actions overflow from this kind of attitude toward the world, whether that's serving or engaging in issues? And how does our church best love the world as it experiences darkness? So how can we as a church love the world like Jesus loved us and love the world in this moment?
Service 7 days a week.
Yeah. I will not be preaching all those 7. But I think, there is, I know you're joking, but there's a sense of, that recognizing the church isn't just something that we come to 1 hour on a week, but it's something that, we practice throughout the week, not necessarily the full church service, but we take, this outside of this room. And I saw a church sign years ago that it was like their exit sign as you left the parking lot, and it said, as our service ends, as our worship ends, let our service begin, and it was, we were sent out from this place, to serve people, to serve the world. And I just like that mentality of it's not just what we do here. This is kind of base camp in a sense sometimes, but then we have work to do when we leave this place. Yeah.
When we go to the Keys, we go back to our church, you know, and as we leave in the parking lot, there's a sign right there. As soon as you enter the road, you are now entering the mission field. It's a good sign.
And I think a lot of it starts with, one of the things that I think changes this whole idea of sharing our faith is that for whatever reason, at least if you're like me, whenever you talk about sharing your faith, it's like I need to go to the random person, that I see somewhere and share the love of Jesus with them. And absolutely, we should do that. But there's a book called Concentric Circles of Concern, and it's this idea of like when you drop a stone in a pond and it ripples out. That we have people right next to us, our family and our coworkers and our friends and our neighbors. Like, there are people that we already have relationship with that we can share our faith with. It doesn't necessarily mean that we have to go to some random person that we never met before and be like, hey, have I told you about Jesus? If you feel called to do that and he calls you to do that, that's great. If you're one of those people that can sit next to somebody in an airplane and share your faith with them, that's great. But I think that we also think about the people that we already relate to. How can we be sharing with them? How can we be, telling them about what Jesus has done in our lives? And I think that for me anyway changed a lot of how I think about sharing my faith. So.
It's also what you're doing, not necessarily what you're saying, because you watch your actions as well. So your actions have to match up with what you're saying.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to wrap up just with our last word here because we have another Camp Buddy opportunity for our high schoolers. So, but Jesus' prayer in Gethsemane is one of the most intimate experiences we read about in the Gospels. As he considered the suffering that he would soon endure, Jesus didn't waver in his commitment to and love for us. Goodness, he's fast these days. Jesus endured the cross because he loved us. Come here. Come here. You stop right at the finish line. The only appropriate response to seeing Jesus' courage under fire is to love God and love others with a similar fervor. Growing in our compassion for the world will lead us to act more like Jesus to those we know and those we've never met. Every person in the world is someone Jesus died to save, so we must treat them with the dignity that God has shown to them in Jesus. So just this idea of, not keeping to ourselves what Jesus displayed in this moment, but taking that love and sharing it with the world around us and changing how he thinks about us is our focus for this evening. So, all right, I'm going to turn it over to my wife real quick. I think if you were here a few weeks ago, you know the drill, but we'll go ahead and share it quickly anyway.
Only 3 this time, so I don't need to beg too many of you. But we have 2 boys and 1 girl that need prayer partners for the week. You just commit to praying for them Sunday through Friday while they're at Lake Aurora Christian Camp, and bring 1 card of encouragement that they can receive as camp meal when they're there with our youth group. Please have it here on Sunday when you come for worship service, if you'll be here, because they leave Sunday. So if you're willing to take Sarah, Noah, or Ezra, thank you, I already have a taker right here, I just need 2 more, and then we will be praying for them as a church family too.
The high school. High school is going to Kansas.
Yep, the high school.
Great opportunity to bring Jesus joy.
That's right. All right, well, thank you all, and...
We need an answer for number 5. Go ahead. Sign up.
Yeah.
Yes, Bill. Next week. Oh, yes, before you go, we are, I'll mention this on Sunday too, but because of the holiday weekend, we won't be having our